galactose. Don't forget that glucose, galactose, glucose, fructose, glucose, 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 fructose, they are actually monosaccharides that are joined together to form disaccharide like what? Like lactose, disaccharide like lactose, like sucrose, and like what? Maltose. Now, the other one that we can have is the case of what? Of isomaltose. So isomaltose is almost the same thing as us as maltose because it contains two glucose units, but different types of bond, right? It contains different types of what? Of bond. That's just one thing about isomaltose. Then another one that we can have is the case of trehalose. Trehalose as well is a disaccharide, and it contains glucose as well. Glucose plus glucose. That's actually what is found in the structure of trehalose. It is still glucose residue, but another type of bond compared to that of isomaltose and also what? Maltose. And one thing I want you guys to understand is that trehalose and maltose, they are actually, because they contain glucose and glucose doesn't mean that they have the same property. Check it down. They can undergo similar reaction, but one thing about them is that their bond will always be different. So that's just it about disaccharide. Then let's simply move to polysaccharide as well. Let's move to polysaccharide, or simply let me talk about oligosaccharide first before I move to polysaccharide. Now let's talk about oligosaccharide. Now oligosaccharide. So as far as oligosaccharide is concerned, it contains 2 to 10 carbon atom, and I've basically explained the 2 carbon atom, the 2 sugar units here. They contain 2 to 10 sugar units. Right? That's one thing about oligosaccharide. And the 2 sugar units, oligosaccharide that contain 2 sugar units are mostly referred to as what? Disaccharide. And I've explained that. Then let's now explain that of the one that contains 3 sugar units. Oligosaccharide with 3 sugar units is called trisaccharide. So it is oligosaccharide with 3 sugar units. That is referred to as trisaccharide. Then the next one I can have is oligosaccharide with 4 sugar units. Oligosaccharide containing what? 4 sugar units. It is called tetrasaccharide. Right? That is what oligosaccharide with 4 sugar units is called. Then oligosaccharide with 5 sugar units is called what? It's called pentasaccharide. And I'm going to be giving you an example of the common one that we have. Oligosaccharide with 3 carbon atom is mostly referred to as raffinose. Actually, raffinose. Raffinose is oligosaccharide with 3 carbon atom. So that is raffinose. Example. We have what? We have raffinose. Raffinose is an example of oligosaccharide with what? With 3 sugar units. And what are the example of the component? The type of component that are present in raffinose. We have the first one. We have the glucose. We have glucose. We have fructose. And also we have what? We have galactose. So these are the components of what? Of raffinose. As you can see, glucose is a sugar unit. Fructose is also a sugar unit. And galactose is also a sugar unit. So if this is 3 sugar units, that is what is present, the major component of what? Of raffinose. And raffinose is an example of what? Of trisaccharide, which is what? An oligosaccharide. Now we have another one, which is what? Tetrasaccharide. Example of tetrasaccharide that we have is actually the case of I think that's stachyus. No, yeah, exactly, it is stachyus, right? It is stachyus. And one thing about stachyus is that it contains 4 sugar units actually, and it contains 4 sugar units. And the sugar that are present is that we have 2 galactose, we have 1 glucose, and also what? 1 fructose. So that is what is present in the structure, or let me say basically in the structure of stachyus. Stachyus is a 4 sugar tetrasaccharide, right? So it contains 2 galactose, then 1 glucose, and also what? 1 fructose. That's just it. And the next one that we can have is the case of fibascose, which is 5 sugar units. It is 5 sugar units. It is referred to as fibascose. So fibascose it contains 5 sugar units. Is an oligosaccharide, a pentasaccharide. So it has 3 galactose in the structure. 3 galactose. That is 3 galactose. That is what I mean is that 3 molecules of galactose. Then it has 1 glucose and also what? 1 fructose. And if you look at it very well now, it is 5. 3 plus 1 plus 1, that is 5. So that's an example of what of oligosaccharide that we have, the common one that we have, right? So that's an example of the common one that we have. So pentasaccharide, hexasaccharide, heptasaccharide, they are all types of oligosaccharide. And one thing about oligosaccharide is that they are not soluble. Most of them are what are non-soluble carbohydrates, and they are not sweet to taste. They are not sweet to taste. That's it. They are not sweet to taste. Then a typical example that we have is the case of alpha limit dextrin. It's an example of what of oligosaccharide that is derived from what from the metabolism of what of carbohydrate, metabolism of starch in the body. So you are going to have alpha limit dextrin, and it's contain two bonds. It's contain alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond and also alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. That's what to find the structure of what of alpha limit dextrin. So that's just it about oligosaccharide. So let's simply move to polysaccharide without wasting our time. Let's simply move to polysaccharide. So in the case of polysaccharide is simply a polymer. Let me just say a polymer of what of simple sugars, right? Poly simply means what? It simply means many, right? Then saccharide simply means what? Sugar. So we are simply talking about what? Many sugar. Polysaccharide is a polymer of simple sugar, that because it contains many sugar units that are joined together by glycosidic bond. That is, the monosaccharide or disaccharide are joined together by what? By glycosidic bond. So that's actually what polysaccharide is. And polysaccharides are insoluble. They are non-soluble sugar. Right? They are non-soluble sugar that in which part of it might be soluble. For example, in the case of starch, we have amylose and also what? Amylopectin. Amylose is said to be what? Soluble in water, where amylopectin is an insoluble portion of the starch actually. Now, whenever you're talking about polysaccharide, it contains many sugar, right? It is non-soluble. Most of them are what? Are non-soluble. And one thing about polysaccharide I want you guys to know is that polysaccharides are divided into two. We have the case of what? Of homopolysaccharide, and also the case of what? Of heteropolysaccharide. Although I'm going to explain this in a separate video in details. I'm going to explain polysaccharide in a separate video. Let me just briefly explain the classification. So whenever you're talking about homopolysaccharide simply means it contains a sugar unit or two. That is, whenever you hydrolyze homopolysaccharide, you are going to have just a single sugar or two. For example, and in the case of heteropolysaccharide, whenever you hydrolyze heteropolysaccharide, you are going to have what? Mixture of monosaccharide and their derivative. That's what you are going to have. Derivatives. So that's what you are going to have in the case of heteropolysaccharide. So hetero simply means it contains different mixture of different biomolecule. That's what they have in heteropolysaccharide. And in the case of homopolysaccharide, it contains a single sugar unit. And example of homopolysaccharide is when you are talking about the case of what? Of starch. We are talking about the case of starch, right? The case of starch. We are talking about the case of dextrin. We are talking about the case of what? Of dextran. We are talking about the case of what? Of inulin, right? And inulin is what? Is a fructose. It contains fructose or true. We are talking about the case of inulin. We are talking about the case of what? Of glycogen, right? We are talking about the case of glycogen. We are talking about the case of what acid that do we actually have? We have starch, dextrin, inulin, glycogen. We have chitin as well. But one thing about chitin is that chitin contains an amino group, right? It contains an amino group. So we have chitin. What other polysaccharide do we have? We have homopolysaccharide. We have dextrin. Okay, I've talked about that one. Then we have chitin as well. So these are actually examples of homopolysaccharide that we can have. And inside starch contains glucose or true. That is either joined by what? By alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond or 1,6 glycosidic bond. So these are the two types of bonds that are found in the structure of starch, because starch is majorly divided into two types again. It's majorly divided into two into two types. That is, it contains two portions. We have the first portion, which is the case of what? Of amylose, and second portion, which is the case of what? Of amylopectin. Right? So one thing about amylose is that amylose contains single glucose all through, and at the same time it is connected by alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond in a straight form. Right? So amylose is the straight, like the linear form, the linear chain of what? Of glucose in starch. So that is amylose. But in the case of amylopectin is connected with by what? By alpha 1,6 and also what? Alpha 1,4, because it is branch. Let me simply say it is a branch portion of starch. That is a branch polymer of what? Of glucose. While the unbranched polymer is what? Is the unbranched polymer, which is also known as what? The linear polymer, is the amylose. Right? So that's just it about homopolysaccharide. And in the case of inulin, as actually, inulin contains fructose all through. It contains fructose all through. So it is a fructosan. So that's what inulin is. Now, in the case of heteropolysaccharide, we have different examples like mucopolysaccharides. So mucopolysaccharide is simply that it contains different types of functional groups, mixtures of functional groups, apart from mixture of carbohydrate and also and their derivative. It might contain sulfur, it might contain nitrogen, it might contain different types of functional groups. An example, we have the case of chondroitin sulfate. Chondroitin sulfate. I'm going to give you an example of heteropolysaccharide. We have the case of chondroitin sulfate. We have the case of keratan sulfate. We have the case of keratan sulfate. We have the case of hyaluronic acid.